You need to find what's right for you and your agency and your client base and things like that. But you don't have to keep the meeting schedule you've been doing right now. When you're the boss, you get to define what your meeting commitments are, and it starts by doing that meeting audit.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. Very excited to have our friend Karl Sakas back. Sometimes at the end of our podcast, we say, we'd love to have you back, and sometimes we mean it, and sometimes we don't. This was one where we definitely really mean it. Carl's a good friend and a good friend of us here at Summit and Anders, and so we want to make sure that we had Karl back to talk about his new book. So, welcome back to the show, Karl.
Great to be here. Glad to be back. Looking forward to helping people.
Yeah, Jamie, when I say that we appreciate people coming on, it always means we appreciate not just Karl, but everybody we appreciate coming on. Just want to throw that out there real quick. But to add to that, I don't know if everybody knows, but Karl actually was at one of our team retreats and spoke with a bunch of our CFOs and kind of went over a lot of good stuff with them. And so Karl not only writes books, does podcasts, but also does engagements such as that, and does a lot of consulting.
Yeah, we actually were lucky enough to record that event, and so that event is something that all of our new CFOs and new team members watch when they start here at Anders, and so it was very helpful for us to have that information. And again, a lot of our CFOs do listen to our shows or tell us they listen to our shows, so they'll be very familiar with you. So let's jump right in. So you recently released a new book, Calm the Chaos, and so why don't you just give us a little bit of intro? I mean, we've worked with agencies long enough. And I think the last 2 years, especially, there's just been so much chaos in the agency world. And so I think the title of your book and the topic of your book is very relevant to what's going on. So you want to just kind of intro the book for us a little bit here.
Absolutely. So my previous book was Work Less, Earn More, How to Escape the Daily Grind of Agency Ownership, which is one of the focuses we talked on at the team retreat in supporting the virtual CFOs. One of the keys, if you want to work less and earn more, is to improve as a leader and a manager. I talk a bit about that in Work Less, Earn More and my prior book, Made to Lead, but I wanted to dig deeper because most agency owners didn't get into the industry to become a boss. The reality is, if you own an independent agency, you are a manager and a leader. And there are things you can do, whether you were born to lead or you've grown as a leader. There are things you can do to get better results from your team, and that's what Calm the Chaos is all about: improving as a leader and a manager, so that all of the weight of running the business isn't solely on your shoulders.
Yeah, and I think you talk about 10 different leadership moves, and I know you do. I don't think you do. I know you do. And just kind of real quick, detoxing your calendar, defining your role, delegating more effectively, training your team to think like owners. Stop the revolving door, which that goes, I think, with not only with clients, but more so with employees. Super important. Create a page business plan, measure the right things, set boundaries with clients, solve problems at the root, and then lead like a human. Love all the titles. Jamie, what's your favorite one there?
Oh, I love delegation. You know that. I think that the delegation is something that we've been preaching since day one here at Anders, and so I think that one really spoke to me, because I think that, especially as a business owner, you need to make sure that you're not doing everything, and at certain times in your career and certain times of your ownership point, you jump in and be, okay, why am I still doing all of this? Why am I still doing this part of it? I need to delegate that. So that's personally my favorite. I think it's been one of the secret star success. But Karl, I'd love to hear you kind of talk. I know you can't choose a favorite, but which one would you like to start with here?
Well, you were talking about tip number 6 out of the 10: delegate intentionally, not recklessly. One of my favorites is, hard to pick out of the 10, but would be number 2, which is accept that you are no longer the sole doer or answer person at your agency. In the early days, agency owners are doing everything. They're doing the client work, they're doing the behind the scenes work, they're doing sales, they're doing everything else. And that's totally normal. But as you grow, it's hard to keep that up. I'd spoken at the SODA Academy, the Society of Digital Agencies, almost a decade ago, and was talking about leadership and management. And one of the attendees said, if you have to be the answer person, you're never going to grow your agency beyond 10 people. Now, in my consulting, I've worked with agencies anywhere from people just getting started to 100 plus team members. There are definitely changes as you go. There are different shifts, but if you're trying to get to 25 or 50 or 100 people, or if you're focused more on revenue growth, you're not going to grow if you were insisting on being the doer for everything and or the answer person for everything.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think that was one of the things that when we started, 20 some years ago, creating what we created, that was the one thing I wanted to make sure happened out of the gate. I didn't want to create an agency of one or a accounting firm of one. I wanted to create accounting firm of a lot. And I think it started right from the very beginning with just the naming convention. We called ourselves Summit CPA Group, and it was just me. And with the idea that, hey, it wasn't going to be Jody Grundon CPA. Then when I brought Adam on, really shortly after, it wasn't Grundon and Hale or Hale and Grundon. It was Summit CPA Group 2. And with that, we could have hung our hats and just said, hey, I'm going to be the doer, and Nam's going to be the doer, and we're going to make a good living, and we'll get a book of business of $300,000 each, and maybe having a receptionist or maybe someone helping out, and make it really create a nice little job for ourselves. And that wasn't my game plan or my thinking, from the very beginning. It was like, hey, how can we leverage people? And in order to leverage people, you got to be able to learn how to delegate. And I think the big thing with delegation, and correct me if you think I'm wrong here, Karl, but a lot of people are afraid to delegate for a lot of different reasons. One, that they think that, hey, I can do it quicker, faster than anybody else can do it. So why would I give it to somebody else? That's one thing. And then the other thing is that what if they get it wrong? What happens? And you talk about this in one of your other chapters there, but it's like, it's like, well, one, getting it wrong, must go backwards. They're getting it wrong. It's okay to fail. People fail all the time. Let them fail, let them figure it out. And that's how they're going to succeed. If you're protecting them the entire time, that's, you're not going to develop what you want. No different than kids. You got to let your kids fail. You can't protect them all the time. Right. And then the other thing is that, when you're delegating, of course you can do it quicker, faster, stronger than anybody else. But the idea is that you want to push it onto them so that you don't ever have to do it again. If you can spend, an hour or 2 hours teaching somebody how to do a task that's repetitive, then you never have to do it again. You just have to learn how to check it, put some controls in there. You don't abdicate it, you delegate it. And, Karl, I'd like to kind of get your opinion on that and your thoughts on that as well. Because I think delegation is really the cornerstone of how we were able to grow and become what we'd become.
You've captured a lot of key things there. For instance, delegation, not abdication. Abdication would be telling your team, figure it out, don't ask me any questions, don't tell me till it's done, and it better be perfect, right? That's not delegation, that's abdication. One of the challenges that a lot of agency owners run into in my work is they're like, well, my team doesn't know how to do it. Or as you mentioned, you could do it faster. True, you can always do it faster than your team the first time. But what if it's something you're doing every month, every week, what have you? Eventually, they'll get up to speed. And importantly, regardless of how long they take, you can focus on higher value things rather than doing that particular thing. When someone's saying like, oh, I don't know about delegating it to my team, I think of a Venn diagram that I call desire, competence, and capacity. And you need all three of them to overlap. Because if something's not getting done, if they don't have the desire to do it, they're going to avoid it. If they don't have the competence to do it, they're going to do it poorly. And if they don't have the capacity, the time to do it, it's probably never going to get done. And if you're missing any one of those, or two or three, it's a problem. So one of my questions when someone's like, oh, I can't delegate, I'm like, do you have someone who could do it? Do they have desire, competence, capacity? If they don't, then they'll have to sort that out. But if they do, that's a you problem, not a team problem.
Right. Jamie, let's get your take on this, because that's really what your job is. Teaching the team how to delegate, right? I mean, that is your job.
Yeah, no, I think that everything that Karl said there is 100% true. Is like, and that's what makes teaching delegation so hard. Is you really run into the two people when it comes to delegation. The ones that give everything up and never review it, and never look at it, and then when something's wrong, don't take the blame for it. Like, oh, I delegated that. What's it's fine. It's gone. And then there's the people that are like, oh no, Jody can never do that. Only I can do that. And they hold on to too much. And right. So you kind of have those two camps of people. And so that's in my role and in our operations, that's been the biggest challenge, is like, getting both of those groups to kind of move to the middle, where like, yeah, you have to be able to pass something on, hand something on to someone, but still take ownership for it and understand exactly what's going on there. So that's really the challenge of delegation to me.
One of the solutions is to define what I would call the values, goals, and resources VGR. You want your team to make more decisions without you, they need to understand what are the values to follow, what are the goals they're trying to achieve, and what are the resources available time, money, people, software, so on. And VGR, values, goals, and resources, could be agency wide. They could be for their particular role. They could be for a particular client. They could even be at the client project or engagement or retainer or campaign level. If people know what those are, they can make better decisions without having to go to you every time.
Which kind of leads kind of in that, in your number 7 or your follow up point there is, letting them fail, and
Yes.
as part of delegating, you've got to accept the fact that there's a high likelihood they're going to fail, especially on the first time you give it to them. How many times you give it to them before you realize maybe this isn't them, maybe it's too high for them, maybe I'm not teaching them well enough, maybe they're just the wrong person.
I'll discover that or uncover that with clients where I start my agency growth diagnostic. This is an initial 8 to 10 week project, looking at where they've been, where they are, where they want to go at a range of areas around strategy, clients, team, time, and so on. And sometimes there'll be team members who just aren't getting the job done. And I'll note, for instance, that they'll mention someone struggling, and I'm like, they've been there for a year. That's enough time to figure things out. I had a client years ago where she said her salesperson wasn't hitting his quota, and he'd been there for 18 months. And I said, "Oh, like how long has he been missing his quota?" The whole time. Never hit his
Never.
quota. Unfortunately, she had built some incentive problems where he was getting a base and then a draw against future commission. It's normal to have a draw, right? Because they need to get started and all, but she never reduced the draw. So he basically had higher guaranteed money and he didn't have an incentive to go out and actually earn the commissions. So that can be a challenge. I don't know. What have you seen with across your clients?
Gene, what's your thought on that? Cross clients or cross people?
Or just in general. I mean, it's a perennial topic.
Yeah, because we are really quick to fire people, and what I mean by that is it's pretty. You can tell pretty quickly if the person's cut out for what we're doing. Because we remotely, we work with digital agencies, we work with other service-based companies. Do they understand it? Are they willing? Are they curious? Do they have the capacity, the mental capacity to work with multiple companies versus just simply one? So I think a lot of times you can kind of figure that out pretty quickly, Jamie. I mean, would you?
You can if you're looking. Yes.
Yeah. And it's about your onboarding process, and not just your onboarding process, but what your post onboarding process is. Because a lot of people can do great for 90 days. A lot of people can do great with 1 or 2 clients and really do a really good job with that. But it's what happens when they get a full book, or what happens when they hit certain milestones. And so we have a process in place where we do full evaluations of their books at certain milestones. Okay, so they just hit 500,000. Let's look at this. Are they doing this for the clients? How do the CFOs feel about them? Because it goes a little bit beyond that onboarding stage. But I think the funny thing when it comes to the agency world is the number of times I've had this conversation with the client, it usually comes around a time when they need to do cuts, right? Like, okay, the business isn't doing as well as they think. Let's evaluate the team. That's the time when I actually discover that, oh, we have 3 or 4 team members that are pretty easy to cut because they're not performing well. And it's like, why did it take a financial crisis for us to get rid of 3 or 4 team members that weren't doing what they were paid to do, right? Like that happens so often and when I have those conversations. So I think it goes exactly to what you're talking about here is like, you need to build the team that you wish you'd had, right? And I know you talk about that in your book. And so I think just talking about that, I think that there's kind of 2 points that I'm thinking about when I read that is one is like, it's really easy to think about it conceptually. Like if I was going to exit Anders and build my own company, it's a really good time for me to think about, okay, what would I want my team to look like? But that's the easy time to do it. How do you do it when you're in deep, right? I'm already running a 30-person agency, and I wish I had different things. So how do you make those changes at that point, in which I think a lot of our agencies are at?
And add to it, and I'm working like 80 hours a week and not getting anything done.
Right. Not a great combination. And so there is light at the end of the tunnel, but it does require making some changes in how people work. You can't keep doing what got you to 10 people to get you to 25, and
Right.
that won't get you to 50, and it won't get you to 100. Some of it's bringing in outside support and advice, so you're not having to make it all up from scratch, but it does require some changes. It won't magically happen.
Right. Well, I think the interesting part is I think a lot of, if you looked at 10 of our clients and walked through with 10 of our agencies, I think agency owners are very creative with how they want their leadership team and how they want their team to look. And so I think oftentimes it's allowing them to use that creativity and try it out. Like you said, it's okay to fail. It's okay to say, you know what, I think I need a person that only does this one thing, and they hire them, and it's like, well, that's just not enough for that one person. Maybe we can make a change for it. So I guess,
Yeah.
like, what steps would you recommend if I'm a leader in an agency right now and I'm like, yeah, we're doing well. We're at 30 people. We're doing really good, but this isn't how I want my business to run. This isn't how I think my agency should look. How would you go from point A, where you're doing okay, but it's not how you want it to look, to point B, where you're like, this is what I want my agency to look like? What steps would you take to move it from those stages?
I would start by identifying what is your ideal agency, because that is going to be unique for each agency owner. And that could usually that involves, if I'm working with clients on this, doing a future vision. I have my advanced retrospective tool where you write about a future day as if it's already happened. Usually, for instance, looking something like 5 years in the future. I mean, you could look further out, you could look more closely, but 5 years is a good timeline because it's distant enough that you have time to figure out how to get there, but it's also, not so far away that it's like, oh, we'll have flying cars at that point. So, the idea is to say is today is December 31st, and then it's, whatever year, 5 years from now, it's a great day because, and you just go from there. And you're probably going to identify things about your day that maybe you didn't realize now. Like, who are the people you're working with? What are you making decisions about? How are you spending your time? What are the things that you're not doing 5 years from now that you are currently? Um, when people go through that exercise, they discover new things. I had a agency owner say, I realized that I want to sell the business. I've been doing this for 20 years. It's time to move on. I'm like, great. So now we can work on scaling up, making you optional, getting the finances in place so that you can have a great exit and move on. It's important to recognize that sooner rather than later, rather than finding out that you are desperate to get out of the business, but it's too late to do something. I noticed that here in North Carolina recently, the local business journal wrote about a recruiting firm that had been in business for a couple decades, husband and wife owning the business, and they just shut it down. They laid everyone off or told them to find new jobs. It was a profitable business. They had been getting various awards. They'd had a record year recently, but the founding couple just was tired of doing it. And one, the CEO, he was saying in an interview that he had hoped to pass the business to his kids. They didn't want to run the business. And he said, as I looked at selling, everyone said I would have to stay for 2 or 3 years. And I'm like, well, that's how it works. Like, they expect you to stay for multiple years. It's unusual to leave sooner. And so I was thinking, like, what if he had started that process 5 years earlier rather than just
Right.
go to the kids? My estimate is he walked away from at least $3 million, maybe more.
Yeah, we always tell clients prepare to sell from day one. That you want to build your business to sell. Whether you sell or not, that's completely irrelevant. But you want to
Yeah.
build it in a way that it's a marketable business because you never know. Life happens, right? COVID hits. Your wife or spouse might pass away. Some things might happen in your life outside of the business world itself that may want you to move there. And if you're not ready to there, it's hard to take 6 months and magically change your business, your processes, your profitability, everything overnight. It just doesn't work that way. So, I mean, building it from the very beginning to sell, I think is really the key to doing it. And it's never too late. Like you had mentioned, they may not have been interested in selling 5 years ago, and it took them 5 years to get to the point where they wanted to. But building it along the way, like you said, it cost them $3 million plus for not doing that. That's a big ouch.
In my work with clients, I'll ask, one of the first questions is, do you lean toward what I would say an equity oriented agency or a lifestyle oriented agency? Pre COVID, it was about 50-50, between lifestyle versus equity. Now it's about 2/3 to 3/4 exit oriented, and the numbers have gone up. pre-COVID, people were like, sell for $3 to $5 million. Now it's 5 to 10 million. I have a client who just received an offer for over 30 million, and they're getting that even higher. I have another client whose goal is to sell for 120 million, which is
Wow.
up. The goal had been 100 million. Now it's up to 120. Now that's a bit further away. That's
Right.
not immediate, but it helps to know where you want to go so you can work backwards to get there. So planning ahead is important. As one of my clients observed, when I was like, let's start the annual planning process sooner and sooner, like not in December. Like you probably should start some of your annual planning in September of the year.
Definitely.
But his observation was like, planning takes planning.
Yeah. It's definitely true. I think the best part about this all is I think you need someone to hold you accountable to having these conversations, because or have some systems in place to have these conversations, right? Because it's very easy to get on the carousel and be like, oh, it's November again. Okay, we didn't do it this year. And then you get in that carousel and you get to that point where it's been 3 years since you've had a conversation of even just someone asking you, what are your long-term goals? What are your short-term goals? Where do you see this business in 5 years? And that's something that we do with our forecasting process. Our forecasting process is more than just building numbers. It's us re-asking some of those questions of, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 3 years? What do we want next year to look like? What is your team going to look like? And it's all those questions that come into that forecasting process that holds teams accountable to have those conversations once a year, because it's crazy how many things change in 12 months. And going back to that recruiting company you talked about, I bet if they were doing that conversation every year, maybe 3 years ago, they'd have been like, oh, we talked to our kids and one's majoring one's in medical school and one's in this, so that's not going to happen. So we probably better think about what our exit strategy is, and they may have not lost out on $3 million that way.
Exactly. And my sense is they had taken enough money out of the business over time that they were going to be okay. But it's risky to depend on a big exit, and if it needs to happen at the exact time rather than being more flexible, you're not going to get as good of a deal. But when I'm working with clients, as I mentioned, I talk about your exit or lifestyle oriented. If they're focusing on an exit, I'll often recommend they get a valuation to know where they stand now, and things like that, so that they're not surprised, right? A client mentioned, for instance, they want to sell for $8 million. Their current valuation, well, I said, do you know what your valuation is now? And they're like, well, no. I mean, it definitely wasn't 8. I did some rough numbers, and it was probably $1.5 to $2 million in valuation. So like,
Oh, geez.
not bad for how long they'd been in business, but they had a ways to go. And so, although they aren't going to figure out all of that in the next couple months, I laid out some targets and other things they can work toward getting there more smoothly. And then, of course, if they do executive coaching, I'll be reminding them about getting it done, and preparing each year and all that.
Well, the executive coaching part, that is so important. I mean, I don't know how an agency can actually, or really any company can actually operate effectively without having an executive coach just to bounce ideas off of, be part of the leadership meetings, that sort of thing. Because it really does keep you accountable. Even with our BCFOs, we're there with the client every single week. It's the cadence that's the most important part about it. It's not simply having somebody there. It's meeting with them on a regular basis where you're actually going through the same stuff, figuring things out, talking to them, being part of the process. Because like you had said, that $2 million. And first of all, everybody thinks their company is worth more than what it is. I mean, I would say 90% of people do. So the $8 million, the $2 million, that doesn't surprise me. I just had a client that thought he could get $100 million, and they're coming back at 30 million. He's like so disappointed. I'm like, well, really, that's what it was. He didn't believe him, so he went to another person, and they said the same thing. It's like, okay, well, now that was the valuation they should have had a few years back, and then his expectations have been more tempered. But kind of getting back to it, it's that reoccurring meeting, setting that goal out there. That $8 million goal is definitely attainable for that client. I mean, that's not, if that's what he wants for his business, you know what, let's figure out how to get there. And that's what your coaching is going to do. You're going to meet with him on a regular basis. You're going to figure out what he's doing right, what he's doing wrong. Eventually he might not want the sacrifice it's going to take to get to $8 million. He may say, you know what, Karl, I'm willing to go 5 million because I don't want to go through the steps that gets to 8 million. Perfectly cool. But at least he knows, or she knows, and they can drive towards that goal. I think it's unbelievably important.
It helps have options. I've worked with my own coach for 11 years. So, like, she has 11 years of history of everything I've shared, and I mean, that's part of the value of working with someone on an ongoing basis because you're like, "Oh, such and such was happening with so and so." They don't have to be like, "Who's so and so?" Right? They know the people you're talking about and the backstory and all, and they can also notice patterns. Like, I'll see if clients are avoiding certain types of things, I'll call it out. Maybe not the instant I notice it, but, if they seem to be avoiding something for a couple of the monthly meetings, we can talk about it. I mean, that's one of the nice things about coaching is that you can have those kind of meta conversations about how it's going. Another benefit is I know what their business and personal goals are, so I'm able to tie things back to that.
Yeah, and I think the candid conversation is the big part, right? I mean, when you have that coach, they're not technically your employee. They're not meeting with you on a daily basis, and they don't know you're not going golfing with you every day. They don't, they're not doing all that stuff, and so kind of be a little bit more distant. We had a CFO, Adam, my business partner. He was, Adam pretty well, but he was talking. He had a CFO conversation just this week where the CFO didn't feel comfortable saying no. The client, hey, I'd like to take another $5,000 out. I'm going to do this, this, and this with it. The forecast didn't justify that. So instead of going through saying, hey, here's your forecast. Here's what's going to happen if you take this out. Here are the levers that you can pull to do that. Are you willing to do that? And she just said, it's okay. I'll do it, or that type of thing. And then that becomes a problem. That becomes a significant problem. And so the coaching up that Adam will have to do with that CFO is just making sure that, hey, let's be candid with them. Give them options. If they want to do that, they're the business owner. They can do whatever they want. It's their business. But
Yeah.
let's be candid and show them the outcome. Here's what the outcome is going to look like if you go this direction. Here's what it'll look like you go that direction. And you know what? Let them make that choice based on informed information. And when he went over that with the CFO, it was like the lights just came on. It's like, well, I'm not being mean. I'm not, I'm not being, it's not a negative thing. It's actually a positive thing because you're making them aware and giving them alternatives. Now, if you just said, no, you can't do it, and just left it there, well, that's a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's a gradient, and I talk about that concept in the Calm the Chaos book as intelligent disobedience. This comes from service dog training, basically where you want to do something and your team's like, wait a minute, you said you wanted to accomplish this, this, or this. This thing you're thinking of doing or that you're asking us to do is contrary to that goal. Are you sure? I mean, I do that with my team all the time, where I'll share something I'm considering. They'll share concerns. Because, of course, keep in mind, if you ask your team to share potential concerns, if you don't listen to them, they're going to stop sharing concerns. So if the team, maybe shares concerns, but I'm not going to follow those, I'll explain why, right? Because there may be some other factor involved or things like that.
Yeah, the expression we use a lot is yes, but, right? Like, so when Adam's talking to the CFOs, it's like, yeah, we don't really want to say no to our clients, but you have to make sure you're giving a yes, but. So like if the client wants to spend $5 million on a new building, yeah, you can do that, but it means you're not going to be able to do all these other things that are in the forecast, right? Or, yeah, you can spend $5 million on a building, but it means you're probably pushing your sale back 3 years, so we can always like give them a yes and follow it with a but, what it actually means for your company and your bottom line and your goals. And that's why it's really important to have those goals in the back of our mind and really understand that. And so one quick thing I want to do here is I want a real quick shift because I think our listeners would be mad if we didn't talk about the meeting audit that you recommend in your book.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think this is a huge thing. And I think a lot of people complain about too many meetings. And I think this meeting audit is a really good idea. Can you just talk a couple minutes about that? And I'm sure Jody and I will have some follow-up questions, but let's chat.
So if you're an agency owner or executive, you likely have a lot of meetings. And I sometimes have clients say something like, I could get my job done if I weren't in so many meetings. The reality is this. If you are a business leader, part of your job is having meetings. The meetings aren't going to go away entirely. But if you're the boss, you get to make your meetings better. You get to define which meetings you attend, which meetings you lead versus those that you're just showing up for. which meetings that you get an update afterwards rather than having to go there live and things like that. So it starts by doing a meeting audit, which is to take a look at your calendar. You could look historically, say over the past few weeks, or you could look ahead to the coming week, 2, 3 weeks, and look at where you're spending your time. And as you look at those meetings, you could think, do I need to be there? You might have some meetings that have just been going out of momentum. You don't have to attend them anymore. You might have some meetings where you've been the person leading it. Maybe you can create some professional growth opportunities for your team by having someone else lead the meeting. So you could just show up and share input and things like that. Some meetings could happen asynchronously, where people share updates through a dashboard or something else. And then maybe the meeting is just about questions or clarifying things, something like that. There may be some meetings where, you don't have to join as often. Maybe you sit in on a department meeting once a month rather than sitting in every week, things like that. There's also a question on timing. For instance, if you have some sort of an all hands meeting Monday at 8 a.m., that's probably not the most popular meeting. You also probably don't want to have it every Friday at 5 p.m., or something like that. But, would shifting it a day in either direction or maybe to later or earlier in the day or something like that, would that make it a better experience for everyone? For instance, maybe you have a weekly meeting on Thursday mornings where you've reviewed how things have been going, you identify what should get done by the end of the week and what's coming up. That way people have a day to get it sorted out rather than having to push quite as hard. You need to find what's right for you and your agency and your client base and things like that. But you don't have to keep the meeting schedule you've been doing right now. When you're the boss, you get to define what your meeting commitments are, and it starts by doing that meeting audit.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, the one thing that you mentioned is time zones and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
We've got the same issue with ours. We've got an employee in Hawaii. We've got them on the East Coast, West Coast, North, South, all over the place. We've got some folks that are out of the country. How do you include those? How do you include those? Because they're in completely different time zones. Jamie, what's your, because you're a big spearhead on that with us, because we used to have our meetings all based on Eastern time. That's because that's where the majority of our clients were, majority of our employees were at the time. And then as we got bigger and bigger to now we got over 200 plus clients. And I don't know how many employees, 70, 60, 70, a lot of employees. You were a big spearhead of changing that, making it more, I guess, friendly for everyone. Can you tell me a little bit about that, or what was your motivation for that?
I'm going to turn this question around on you, Jody. So we used to have our leadership meeting, which was 10 people, all leaders, which I am one of, and we used to have it at 7 o'clock Mountain Time, which I'm in Mountain Time, so 7 a.m. Mountain Time on Monday morning. And I'm a good soldier, and I participated, and I would be there, but I don't think I was my best self in that meeting, because obviously I just came off a Sunday night, long dinner with the family, coming in. The first thing I do on Monday morning is have to jump into that meeting, and I don't think I was the best participant. So I voiced that for a couple of years, and then I think we've shifted it now to being end of day Monday. And so I'm going to turn this question on you, Jody. Do you feel like I'm a better participant in that meeting since we've made that time shift than I was when it was at 7 a.m.?
Honestly, no, I don't think you're any different. I think you're professional enough where you gave it 100%. I didn't notice any difference. I still don't notice a difference. I mean, the Jamie at 7 a.m, you may have felt tired, you may not have felt, but you are super professional. And I think some folks can do that, others can't. So if I were to give that to other people on the team, yeah, they'd probably show up half the time, look disheveled, maybe with all the excuses in the world why their alarm clock didn't go off, all that kind of stuff. That never once happened with you. So professionalism, that and the uniqueness that you have in your abilities, that no difference at all. Now, if Karl was there, Karl would be the problem kid for sure.
No, I will say, I feel different. I think that, I was always professional. I never missed it. I was always there, but I feel like I bring more to the meeting now that it's in the afternoon. And I've always paid attention, but I have more energy, and I feel like energy is one of my strengths, is bringing energy to stuff. And I always hated that 7 a.m. meeting, because I was like, I'd be talking, I'd be doing my report, but it was more like just kind of monotone, where now I'm like doing my report and I'm all excited and animated about it. So I do feel a little different about it. So I think that, yeah, it's important to us as a distributed firm to make sure we're thinking through all that. And so I do think that, yeah, it's really important to do that meeting audit, especially as a leader. What meetings do you need to be in? And that's something that I've, as I've grown more in my leadership role, I've looked at and be like, okay, that's probably a meeting I don't need to be in, but this meeting I do need to be in, or this meeting is something I just need to have a 5-minute meeting on afterwards to summarize what's going on. So I've done a lot of that within my schedule over the past couple of years here, and it's very been helpful for me, because there's so many of those days where you're like, oh, it's 5:00 now, it's time for me to actually get my work done because I've been in meetings all day. So.
I think it's also important to, record them and have them transcribed. With AI nowadays, I mean, that it should be a no-brainer for everybody on this call to be recording all their meetings. And the reason being, a perfect example, Adam was in St. Louis the last couple of days, wasn't able to make our Monday meeting. And you know what? He listened to it on the drive home. And with that, didn't miss a beat. He picked up on everything, asked questions. He doesn't have to then rehash that, or what did they talk about, that sort of thing. Then I can make funny jokes about him during the meeting, and just to see if he's actually listening to bring him up, But no, I think, recording them, I think, and transcribing them, I think is really, it's a tool that everybody on this call should be using.
For sure. I've tried a couple tools, did Fireflies. I use Fathom now, which is great. I love that I can send a recap instantly. Like, I'll double check to make sure that it's captured. It's fairly good at capturing actionables down to the person, and you're getting 90% of the benefit in almost no time, which is great.
Awesome. So we have reached the point of our show where we can have a fun question. So I'm here with two very intelligent people. So I have to ask this question because it's one of my favorite questions. And something that I feel like most people are doing nowadays is just doing deep dives, right? Like with the YouTube culture and with the Chat GPT and with just TV and stuff like that. I think people are like, this is something I really want to learn more about. And we have more access at our fingertips than we ever have. So I'm kind of curious for both of you guys, what's the last topic that you've done a deep dive on? So Jody, I'm going to start with you. So is there a topic that you've been curious about lately and really deep diving into?
A deep dive, and it's kind of funny that you talk about this, because it has really nothing to do with virtual CFO or really nothing to do with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I've been getting really heavy into rental properties with my wife.
Okay.
And so the deep dive there is, hey, what first of all, what do I want to do when I'm no longer, working at Anders, and no longer doing, accounting stuff and finance stuff and that sort of thing? Is that going to be a year? Is that going to be 10 years? I don't know. Whenever it happens, it happens, right? But what's my second career? And I've really had a lot of fun working with my wife and doing a deep dive into those rental properties. I mean, how much to buy them for, what the key metrics are, how to fund them without having a lot of cash out of pocket. What are the right and wrong things to do? The first one we bought, it was like, hey, this is great. And then we had to put $100,000 of freaking fix up stuff in it, and it became not great anymore. It was really great. And it's like, oh my gosh. Another one we bought, we found out that went through the licensing, went through all the different tests and stuff like that beforehand. We're in it for 3-4 months. It's running out really great. And then we find out it's had termites for the last 5 years and has to be rebuilt. It's like, oh, so a couple things, it's just those things that, a seasoned veteran would have probably came in and they would have figured that out. No doubt about it. Yeah. And it's just that the learning experience is, to me, is a lot of fun. That's, to me, that looks like a negative, but to me, it's really positive. So what we're going to do is we're going to tear it down and we're going to put a really nice one, and in the same lot, and it's going to make even more money, where we may not have done that before. The first one, we may get it to a point where we flip it instead of renting it out, because now it's worth a lot more money because all the remodeling you put into it. So there's a lot of positives we can learn from that. But I think just digging into how short-term rentals work, how long-term rentals work, getting different areas of the country. We've got some rentals in Vegas. We've got some rentals in Indiana. We're looking in Florida, looking in Tennessee. So some of the different areas there. And it's a lot of fun doing that deep dive and really investigating, hey, what's the benefit? What's the taxes? What's the cash flow? What are the KPIs? What's going to make us happy in the end? Do we want to build a big, 50 door, company, or we want to have a 100 door company, or do we just want to have a 10 door company? So those are the types of things that my wife and I are able to really take a deep dive in and have a lot of fun doing it.
Well, Jay, I can tell you the house across the street just went up for sale. So Colorado Springs is kind of a pretty good rental town. So if you're ever interested, I can send you the Zillow address. So
There we go. Now, just don't tell anybody on the audience there. I don't want anybody else calling me.
There we go. They have keep it. Yeah, there we go. Well, and actually, two resources on that topic. My parents were both career Army. After they retired, they had some rental properties, and they put the kids to work. I'm the oldest of 5. Turns out in the U.S., child labor laws do not apply if it is a family business. So, like in elementary school, was helping. It built character. They said. 2 websites. One would be MrLandlord.com, which is terrible website design, but great content on, especially on the like rental income side of things. And then also the RIA organizations, Real Estate Investors Association, REIA. If you go to National RIA, so nationalreia.org, it'll help find chapters near you. So I have a number of clients who do real estate investment. That can be a good resource. Obviously, every chapter is different. Some people will show up hoping to sell random things to new members, but great content, worth exploring.
Great, appreciate that. Thanks,
awesome.
Carl.
And we can put those in the show links as well. So if everybody else is interested in the real estate realm. All right, Carl, what's your deep dive? Doesn't have to be work. It can be fun. Do whatever you want. What are you learning about recently?
Yeah, non-work topic: collecting art. So I like art. Enjoy experiencing it, and then building my collection. These are not by Mark Rothko. I painted those myself, so I don't think if you're seeing video, the paintings behind me, not going to sell for millions of dollars. But yeah, so enjoying that. There are a lot of books on collecting art. I recently just reread/listened to a book called The Art of Buying Art, third time. So the first time was like, oh, okay, early. And then I listened, I think I read it, then I listened a year or two later. Now I'd learned new things, and I just re-listened to it again. And so it's one of those things, it's endless as to what you could learn, but every time you learn something new, you can make better decisions going forward.
Artwork, that's hilarious, because when we moved down here to Florida a few years back, we went to an art gallery, and I fell in love with David Goddard stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with. He's got all these little aloes, little caricatures, and it was super cool, because what it did, it brought a lot of humor out. Because when I look at art, a lot of it, to me, it doesn't have a lot of meaning to me. And when I saw his artwork, where like I got several of them actually hanging up in my condo here, and one's a little coffee bean, getting coffee, with a little saying on it. Another one's a little coffee bean in a coffee cup, and an angel in a martini glass, that you can't really tell. It looks like it's the part of the smoke or whatever coming out of the glass. It's actually an angel. Different things like that. It really drew a lot of meaning, and it created a little humor to it too, with a different look. That's what I really kind of attracted myself to him. And then as I really realized what I did like, then it was like, well, then what else does that person have? And do I want to get all of his artwork, or do I want to get something similar to it? And then the next little artwork, the long, I'm trying to think of the artist's name, but it has 2 little chicks talking with a little rope between it. And it's like my wife on the other end, as I travel a lot, we're always constantly talking. I was like, oh, that's really cool. And it brought meaning to, what we actually do. And so, my recommendation to anybody listening, find something that just doesn't look cool, but really truly has some sort of meaning to, your life. It may have meaning to nobody else, and that's irrelevant, but has meaning to you. You can look at it every day and get a little of yourself out of it. I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
Love it.
It helps to have interests outside of work.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
So my deep dive is going to sound way less sophisticated than both of you guys, because I've recently listened to a podcast with a mentalist on it, and to me, like, that's the most fascinating thing. Like, how in the world they do that stuff. And again, we did see a mentalist when we were in Vegas, and I think I was able to figure out some of the way they did things. But when I see people do things live, I'm like, how in the world are they doing that? And so like I've started to do like a lot of YouTube videos and reading on it and been like, I don't want to become a mentalist. I'm just curious about how in the world are they able to, because they admit it, like, we're not psychics. We don't claim to be psychics. We're just reading body language, and we're reading cues, and we're listening to the words that are coming out and how they're coming out and the way you react to stuff. And so it's been very, very fascinating to me, just watching over and over just different like mentalist videos of them doing stuff, with sports people or with writers or readers and stuff like that. So that's kind of been my deep dive lately, is just really like trying to learn more about that craft. So that's been my deep dive.
I do note in Calm the Chaos, your team cannot read your mind. You do hire someone who can. Right. I have succeeded in that. Keep them.
Yeah, that's right. You might have to re-edit that book a little bit. I think maybe new version out. Put a little disclaimer by it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think this has been a great episode. I know we went out longer than we normally do, but that doesn't surprise me with how much information was in this book and much we could talk about. But I think our listeners are really going to enjoy this and get a lot out of it. So really appreciate you coming on today, Karl, and you as well, Jody, as always.
Yeah, and real quick, Karl, how can people get a hold of you? Because either to read your book or to sign up for some sort of consulting arrangement with you, or maybe even have you at a team retreat, which I highly recommend if anybody out there is looking for a guest speaker.
Oh, thank you. So, I have a free chapter of Calm the Chaos. So if people want to get that, check it out before they potentially get their own copy. You can go to bit.ly, so bit.ly/Karl CAS. So Karl with a K, all lowercase. So bit.ly/KARL CAS for Creative Agency Success.
Nice.
Awesome. Great. Well, appreciate that info. And like I said, this we'll put there'll be a lot of links in these show notes, because there was a lot talked about today. So there'll be a lot in there, but appreciate both you guys.